You are listening to the USDN on the DSPN.
It's a trap!
What is up, everybody, and welcome to the United States Department of Nerds, where we are for the people, by the people, and of the people. And tonight, from secret government experiments, cryptid folklore, to ethical horror rooted in reality, Mark Berton crafts stories that feel terrifyingly possible. On this episode of the USDN Podcast, we dive deep into the Aroughcoune, a chilling cryptid. There we go. A chilling cryptid horror novel centered on a genetically engineered prehistoric raccoon unleashed in Western Pennsylvania, and the human cost of science gone too far. This isn't just monster horror; it's conspiracy, survival, ancient knowledge, and government secrecy colliding in the woods. The Council of Nerds is now in session. Mark, welcome to the United States Department of Nerds, my friend.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hey, anytime. Again, I apologized earlier about not getting back to you right away. We were on a little Christmas holiday, but I'm glad we were able to get you in and get you scheduled. You're the last of 2025, my friend.
Awesome. I appreciate it.
So let's jump right into it. What was the original spark that led to the creation of the Aroughcoune?
The original spark actually came out of COVID. Back then, we were in lockdown up here in Pennsylvania, and my daughter's school went virtual, and I was working remotely at home. So in the mornings, I would be on with her classes online. And then after that was done, I would, go and do my day job and get that done. And their curriculum at the time was all STEM based: science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And I got this idea about, writing a book that, the science behind everything in the book actually would be, legit. Like this would be stuff that you could do in the real world. And it just went ahead with that. And, the raccoon creature. I mean, if you know your conspiracies, the government has used anything from dolphins and rats and dogs to for military purposes. And a raccoon would be exceptionally adept at that purpose because it's got 5 fingers. It could hold a weapon. It's a natural problem solver. Just scale that up a little bit, and you have an animalistic soldier, to work with. So this one, kind of went off the rails and grew a little bit too big and escaped. But that was the whole genesis of the story.
Dude, that is so freaking awesome. So why a prehistoric raccoon, and how did you shape this into something truly terrifying?
We in the book, we scaled it up. I scaled it up to it's about 15 feet tall. They say in the book it's about about the size of a small bungalow. And it made its way out of a lab on Montauk Island. Plum Island up in Montauk, and crossed through New York down into Pennsylvania, and made its way through Western Pennsylvania. It is nocturnal, so they had a hard time trying to find it. Nobody really knows where it went in during the day, whether it burrowed or caved or whatever. But it made its way to Western Pennsylvania. Along the way, it caught a case of rabies, and then it went on the warpath. And so it really goes off the rails at that point.
Could you imagine, though, taking the trash out of a grocery store at night and finding that big old thing eating out of your trash bin?
It's eating out of your trash bin, tearing off your arms, your legs. This thing's got a grip, so.
That's one of those where you open the door and it's sitting there eating out of your trash. You just close the door, go back in, like, I ain't taking the trash out.
Exactly.
So Plum Island has a real world reputation for secrecy. How much research went into grounding that aspect of this creature?
Mm-hmm. Thing was researched. The Plum Island part, that was early stages of the book. It kind of, it ties in the Montauk Monster in that people, early ones that got escaped, prototypes, if you will, that escaped, turned out to be what the Montauk Monster really was one of these Aroughcounes that got out. And then the geography through Connecticut, all the way down through New York. I mean, there was a lot of studying maps and finding there was a particular waterfall where the military thought they disposed of this thing. That was in New York. And, the creature went off the side of the falls, and they never found it, so they assumed it was dead. The geography in Western Pennsylvania, I took a little bit of liberty with because I needed a place that kind of had a college town nearby. Yeah. And State College is a few hours away from Pittsburgh. So I kind of brought State College closer to Pittsburgh. And that's the territory where this whole story takes place. But there's coordinates in the book that line up to actual places. If you go into Google Maps and look these places up, you can find them. There's a state hospital in the book. There's a side story where this kid tells us a backstory about this cannibalistic stuff that goes on in an old mental hospital. Yeah. And that was based on Dixmont State Hospital, which is right outside of Pittsburgh in the suburbs. It closed down in 1984. But it was a creepy place that they finally tore down. So, but yeah, the genetics of everything, the rabies as a virus, researching rabies was very detailed because, you think you get rabies from a bite, but there were some studies done in the late 70s and early 80s that found, I think it was the University of Kansas, that found that you can actually get rabies from ingesting carrion, rabid carrion, dead animals that had it, vector animals. So, everything is, I tried to keep everything what I call Mythbusters plausible. And the science may drift here and there, but at the end of the day, everything in the book, I think, could be done, if you had the ingenuity and the know-how that these kids in the book had.
I like it. So did your journalism background influence how you approach the realism in the story and the government cover-ups?
Oh, yeah. Like I just mentioned, Dixmont. I covered Dixmont State Hospital for about 4 years with the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review, and that was part of my territory. And over my time of covering that, the owner gave me pretty much unfettered access to the property and grounds. So I went up and I took all kinds of photos, found the cemetery, found the tunnel system that went under the property, and dispelled with a lot of the urban myth that people come up with abandoned mental hospitals. I mean, it wasn't a place of torture. It was a place of healing. It's just that the healing at that time seemed barbaric due to 2026 standards. So yeah, I mean, that researching the different conspiracy theories, that take place in the book. I have a sort of like a Men in Black team that is like the cleanup crew, and so bringing these guys in, it's all over the place. But yeah, the researching all these places, the geography, the lore, the cryptids, that were out there, and weaving these into something that was kind of a news story, using existing things, plus the Native American aspect of it as well.
I'm glad you just brought that up. That was actually the very next question. So Mingan Jones introduces the indigenous folklore and herbal knowledge into the book. Did you refer or work with indigenous people to kind of own that aspect of the book?
No, and I not anybody in particular.
Okay.
But what I tried very hard to do was to research these stories and the tribal affiliations, and not appropriate anything. I'm not passing it off as my own. Anything that's in the book is referenced. It's out there. It's in the world. There's a rich history and mythology that every tribe has that's unique. So bringing that into this book and having that representation was important. I didn't want to have like this magic medicine man, shaman, stereotype, character. I wanted to have a believable representation of an actual Native American person. Unfortunately, Pennsylvania has no tribes left. We are.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I think the closest tribe, you have to go over towards Ohio or up into New York.
That's wild to think about, because there's so much woodlands in Pennsylvania still that you would think that there would still be some tribal influence there. And it's crazy to think about that there isn't any.
Nothing. Pittsburgh had a council of the Council of Three Rivers, I believe it was called at one time, and that was just ancestors. People that have Native American blood. They would kind of associate there. But we used to be where I'm located in Pennsylvania. We're on Shawnee land, but there's no tribes here.
Oh wow, it's crazy to think about. I would never think that of all places, Pennsylvania wouldn't have that. But how important was it for you to balance modern science with the ancestral wisdom that your character Mingan provided in the story?
He provides a lot of backstory, and again, I took these myths and I kind of repurposed them for this particular story. The balance, it was important. Like I said, I didn't want to appropriate anything. I didn't want to steal anything or be accused of it. I wanted to more or less highlight this stuff and highlight my science background and like I said, stick to that STEM thing and make this a book that's accessible for anyone, really. My publisher is based in the UK,
which is wild to me that it's based in the UK.
in England, they consider this book young adult, but here in the States with our puritanical history, this is definitely an adult horror book. So it's just just take that.
It's crazy to see how like the two different countries look at the book.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at one point I approached our local school district and I said, because I'm a joiner, I'm a volunteer, I'm on the board of directors with our public library here, and I tried to involve community in things. And I went to the school district and I said, to the art teachers, I said, do you think we could have a little contest for a cover for the book? And the publisher was cool with it and everything. And so they said, well, what's the book about? I said, it's about this giant raccoon. I said, but, there's some mild gore, there's some mild drug references. There's a few F-bombs here and there. And they're like, oh, I think we'll pass. So,
but imagine how cool that would have been for the kids, though.
Yeah. And, you do what you can, and, you work with what you have. And, I respect their decision at the end of the day.
It's a really cool cover. I don't know if there were different covers produced for the book or not, but the one that you sent over to me, I thought was really cool because it's you're like, I know this is about a raccoon, a giant raccoon, but what's with the cute raccoon on the cover?
I know. That was my publisher, Ray. She came up with that concept. I kind of tweaked it in Photoshop and, brought it all together. But, and then we went back and forth and there were a couple different takes. One, I believe, was if you were laying down on your back and you took a photo of a tree canopy looking straight up, that would have been a cover. But she wanted to show a creature, on there. And I trust her judgment. She sells books and I just write them. So.
No, it's a really cool concept of a cover because it's not at all what you expect it to be. I mean, it is, but it isn't. You imagine it's about a mutant raccoon. It should be huge, but it's not. It's this little cute raccoon walking on a tree canopy, and you're like, I like it because it's like it works, but it shouldn't work.
Yeah, and I like it too because one of my favorite, all-time favorite horror stories is Frankenstein, and I grew up in that era where the Boris Karloff black and white 1931 was on.
Oh yeah.
Our Saturday suspense theater, what we had here in Pittsburgh, and so I grew up with those movies and. He's grown on me. Frankenstein and the Hulk, are like the two most tragic figures, I think, in all of horror history. Maybe Candyman, but you have this figure that's so misunderstood, and I think that subtlety that she brought into that raccoon on the cover, kind of gives that feeling that it's not the raccoon's fault. This thing was never meant to be born. It was created, and it's not its fault that it's a monster.
Now, I like that thinking on that. So, do you see folklore as a counterweight to unchecked scientific ambition? We're getting a little technical here, a little philosophy.
Yeah, seriously. I don't see it as a counterbalance to it. I see it as having a wisdom on how to use power, and science is a power. It's a power that we all have access to. In folklore, mythology, even not just Native American, but you go back to your Greek and Roman mythology. It's interactions. It's how do people handle power appropriately, ethically, morally, and survive. And science is that power in this case, in this story, that people have to wrestle with. And of course, science is what gave us the Manhattan Project. It's what gave us
such a good movie and an even better book.
Yeah, it gave us Project Echelon. It gave us all these massive government projects that loads of conspiracy theories have been based on, and it has gone unchecked. And these old stories tell you, at their core, how do you handle this power? How do you whether it's a gift from the gods, like a Prometheus type of thing, or how do you responsibly treat this gift that you have as a species?
Yeah, no, dude, that answer was perfect. Damn, that was good. So, the Aroughcoune explores ethical limits of experimentation. Do you kind of see this as a cautionary tale? of like kind of like where does advancing science like begin and like ethics stop, kind of, or how far do you have to bend your ethics or scientific ethics to go to that next level? So how do you see that? Do you see it as like a cautionary tale? Or is it just
it's a cautionary tale? It's both. I mean, you know, you seem like you and I are probably in the same age bracket. You know, growing up, you know, we had they would do testing on monkeys. You know, they would do you know, testing for cosmetics on rabbits, and you know, all these controversies that have come out over the years that we've lived through. You know, everything in the book is me. It's how I see the world. It's my filter in this story. And, you know, everything that I've absorbed as a human being living on this planet for 50 years, you know, has come to that point, you know, and it comes out in my writing. So all these characters that I have are different facets of me, you know, and how I perceive things. You know, sometimes you have to twist them around to make the narrative work, but still, I mean, you know, you have these issues that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So, you know, I'm sure, you know, somewhere, you know, there's unethical testing going on.
Oh, sure.
Still
to this day.
Yeah. We just haven't heard about it yet. And there's other, you know, conspiracy theories about that. I mean, you look at, you can look up things about Nestle and how people think that Nestle's trying to control the water supply. So, you know, and that's when it's out there that people can look up if they're curious. But, you know, there's all kinds of things in this world that, you know, we've seen movies, we've seen books, we've seen comics where mankind has been on this trajectory of, you know, taking over the world in some form or another, whether it's like some kind of Terminator future where it's through computers and robots, or whether it's controlling natural resources to a point where people like you and me can't go to our tap anymore and get a glass of water. I mean, it's just this type of Black Mirror world that we're all headed towards in some way. So who's going to make it to the finish line first, you know?
Yeah. If Mother Nature has taught us anything, she eventually flips that script and self-corrects that course anyway.
Yeah.
So within this book, government agents linger in the background. They appeared to be scarier than the actual creature itself. Was that done intentionally, or like what was like, how did you come to that, you know?
They're actually scary in their reach. They have access to all of this, you know, the full strength and power of the federal government. You know, they have access to, but in the end, I mean, they're kind of comic relief in a way, in that the main man in black, you know, his name, his code name, or they refer to him as Aroughcoune, is in, you know, clean up in Aroughcoune, and they're the cleanup crew that comes in and fixes these things when you know, science goes awry. And if they have escaped raccoons, if they have a Montauk monster that gets out, you know, this is the cleanup crew that they send in, and you know, they use their resources to fix things. And I don't want to give away, because it's kind of the tail end of the book, so I don't want to give away too much of that as for spoilers.
Yeah,
but,
no, let's not spoil
you know,
it.
They make sure that everything is nice, neat, and tucked. Yeah, but they tuck it, and they tuck it away, and they put it to bed, and they make sure that the public, you know, doesn't know what's really going on.
No, I like it. I like books like this because you get your real world stuff that could actually happen, and then you get your sci-fi that kind of intertwines through all of it. And it, to me, it just makes fun stories. But this is not really fun, but do you believe secrecy is necessary for security or inherently dangerous when it comes to these instances that we could have, like a 15-foot raccoon escaping its It's laboratory. Definitely makes for more fun.
I mean, you have to have secrets as a country. I think, man's drive to turn everything into a weapon of war. Maybe that's my filter. I mean, I grew up with, Twilight Zones, and, Rod Serling was extremely anti-war.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so, it's like,
missing
like
some Alfred Hitchcock in there, and
everything that goes.
That's a great weekend right there. Twilight Zone, and
but everything that everything that's good everything that's good, that it seems like man has a way of corrupting, and how can we turn it into a weapon and get a leg up on somebody else? And I think that if people would work together a little bit more, and have a little bit less secrecy in the world, and just say, hey, we have these amazing things we could show you, and
100%.
We could solve a lot of problems in this world.
But it's got to be about the first one to fix it. The first to fix it gets the paycheck for fixing it, right?
Yep.
So how did your time as a journalist shape your storytelling?
The dialogue was definitely one way. Creating believable dialogue is extremely difficult for any writer. So, having just people talk naturally and sound, like they're talking like you and I are here, was one way that came into play. Researching, knowing where to find information, knowing how to use information, all those things, having a backlog of stories that I've covered throughout my career that were just, some of them, were just mundane, what's the council doing tonight? Others were, really horrific. You're on a crime scene where they find a body that's been melted into the couch for 3 months in August. It turns out the guy was you could smell it.
Dead bodies.
Yeah, you could have smelled it. It was about 50 yards from the building, and you could smell it. And the guy, turns out he committed suicide, but he was going to go on a rampage. He was surrounded by shells and guns, and he was loading his own, and nobody missed him. He was just that type of guy that he didn't get along with anybody, and so those are the types of stories that you come across as well. And you also find that life is not black and white all the time. I did a story early on in my career, right out of college, on a guy that worked for a gas company, and he saved his coworker's life. He pulled him out of a ditch where the gas was leaking, and as soon as he pulled him out of the ditch, the whole thing went up in a flame. And so he was getting all these accolades for that. Well, flash forward, a year and a half, and the guy's on the run. There's a manhunt in Pittsburgh. He killed his wife. He killed his son. He booby-trapped his house for the police. And he was, he went through multiple jurisdictions throughout Pittsburgh on a day-long manhunt. And he ended up dying in a one of those concrete sewer tubes. But I mean, I shook hands with this guy. I mean, I congratulated this guy. I was, I wrote this guy up as a hero. Yeah. But you never know. It's
a year and a half later, he's on a killing spree through Pittsburgh. Yeah. That's wild. But it just goes to show: do you ever really know your friends and neighbors?
Exactly. And
Speaking of your friends and neighbors, Yum Thanks says shout out to you.
But it's what's that trigger that can turn somebody from that nice guy that can save your life into that guy that
it's
goes
wild
on
that you just don't know. You don't know what's going to trigger the next
One bad day
instance
is all
like
it takes.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I mean, there's been plenty of movies like that. So your previous books, Ditsmont State Hospital and Moon Township, also kind of blend history with unease. Is this kind of like your signature that you use in your books, or is it just pure coincidence that both these other books kind of carry that theme?
It was coincidence. Those were my first two, and they're historical. They're those sepia colored ones you see in the airports and local towns, and they were just projects that I had going on, and then I kind of went dormant, as far as writing. I mean, the Dixmont, I think, was 2007 that came out, and then I didn't do anything until Aroughcoune came around, and I really had the time. COVID afforded us all the time to work on so many side projects. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, it's. I think my signature, if somebody had to pin me down, would be, the history a little bit, but the science, the truth, and just having lovable characters, characters that you can relate to. So be like, Zin and Bill in the book. These are kids you would have gone to high school with. They're friends that we all had growing up.
And I'm glad you brought up Zin and Bill, because they are kind of thrown into chaos without any type of warning. Why did you choose them as your entry point to the Aroughcoune?
They were me. I mean, there was me and my best friend in high school. You have those lazy days where it's like, hey, let's just pick up and go somewhere for the weekend. Go fishing. Let's go hike. That
was us. We would go hiking through the woods after school. Right when we get off the bus, just drop our stuff off the front door and set off through the woods and be back in time, for dinner.
Exactly. And, it's like we had those days, and I think everybody has those days. So, it was that childhood, bringing that feeling back, that nostalgia. And, they bump into this game warden, Slaughter, and they bump into another game warden, Monique McKesson, and, and Minion and the whole cast. And so, it's people ask me what it's about, and I kind of say it's almost like Stand By Me meets an episode of the X-Files. So,
dude, those are two great things right there.
Yeah.
This is my guy right here in the chat, Donald. Great guy. Check out his comic book Powerscape if y'all haven't already. It just is also making its way into stores right now. So if you're in Albuquerque, go hit up your local comic shop. His comic book is now popping up in stores, hopefully nationwide here soon. So shout out to Donald. But he used to study the Lenny Lenape growing up in Jersey. He is kind of heartened to read from someone else who knows the indigenous history of that area. So shout out to Donald, man.
Yeah. How you doing? We came up with our library. Like I said, I'm on the board of directors there, and we actually formed a sister library program with the Shawnee tribe in Oklahoma. And so, it's not very active. They had a really tough time of COVID, but we established this. We put the roots down, and hopefully we can circle back to that and make that thrive a little bit more in the years to come. But yeah, it's I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
So Doug Slaughter, I'm glad you brought him up, because he was literally my next one. What was your plan with him? Because he kind of seems intentionally unreliable.
He's unreliable because he's tracking this thing in secret, and so he bumps into the kids, and he's looking for clues of this animal. He knows it's in the park, and so he wants to keep them safe. He's got all kinds of motives going on, but he wants to figure out what this thing is and where it's going to go to next. So he tracked it all the way from Griswold, Connecticut, down to Western Pennsylvania, and that's his story is kind of short in the book, but
we'll leave it at
he's
that. We'll leave it at
that. Yeah. but he gives the backstory. He knows the history of it.
Mhm.
He knows the conspiracy, and I think if he, and it's no spoiler. I mean, he gets offed early on, but I think if he had survived to the end of the book, he would have to have been taken care of in another way because he knows too much.
Oh yeah. So let's talk about Monique McKesson.
Mm-hmm.
She is the warden in the story. How important to you? What was important to you when you were writing her character in particular?
Not to have somebody post me in Reddit on how not to write women.
Did that happen?
There's a whole subreddit on how not to write women, and it's just like excerpts of books, you know, and that are total cheese. You know,
there's a Reddit for everything.
Yeah, so I was trying to stay out of there, but I wanted her to, you know, be strong. She's a daughter of a single dad. She's African American. I wanted her to be in a position of leadership. I wanted her backstory to be believable. I wanted her to be a example for young women, you know, to show them. Again, I mean, this STEM stuff, the whole thing originated with, you know, it was, you know, my daughter's schooling and, you know, trying to get women in science and women in engineering fields. And so, you know, keeping in with that theme, you know, I thought it was natural to have a woman warden, you know, who had these leadership capabilities and this strength inside of her that could become heroic at a moment's notice. And she does.
I like it, man. And I know you keep bringing up the STEM program. My daughter in middle school and part of high school went to a magnet program. So I know exactly what you're talking about. It was during the COVID timeframe as well. Yeah. Yeah. Now she's a pre-med student. So cool. Kind of wild. It feels like yesterday, but it's been a hot minute now since COVID, and it's just wild.
Yeah, it goes by so fast. You know, my daughter's 12 now. She'll be 13 in May. So
mine will be 20 next year. So it goes fast.
Yeah,
and she's got driving school in like 2 weeks. Got that in the middle of the day. So, what draws you to locations that are kind of like dark and forgotten? I know if you're like me, I kind of like those. I like the history of those types of places, and like I'm too old to explore them anymore. But if I was still in my youth, I would be like the first guy, like trying to there's got to be a window we can jimmy or something to get into this place.
Yeah,
I'd be that guy in the horror movie, you know.
Yeah, I'm. You know, it's. I don't believe in the paranormal, so I willingly go into these places, you know, that have this creepy history or this creepy background, and you know, I appreciate it for what it is. You know, if it was a house where a tragedy took place, or if it was a, you know, Gettysburg battlefield or something like that, you know, I don't go there looking for ghosts. You know, I go there, you know, trying to absorb what I can from the site, and to internalize that and really delve into the history of how horrific these things are, you know, that take place. But yeah, people ask me all the time, especially when the Dix Bump book came out. It's like, "Did you see any ghosts up there?" And it's like, no, I didn't. Yeah. You know, people would go up all the time. Local radio stations and things would spend Halloween night in there and broadcast from there. And you know, people would say they see orbs.
That's kind of cool, though. You know.
Yeah, I mean, the owner was super chill. I mean, he was like, you know, just do what you want, just don't get in trouble.
Break nothing. Yeah. It's wild that you bring. That's like some old country stuff right there. He's like, yeah, I don't mind if you go back there, but just don't be breaking shit.
Yeah, and he did everything. I mean, he filmed car commercials up there. He let people hunt up there. You know, anybody. It was 407 acres. So if you had some use for that land, area. Yeah. So if you had use for it, he'd let you do it.
So, is there any more to explore with the the Aroughcoune?
I bring back Mingan and Bill. I'm working on the sequel right now.
Oh, nice.
That book has a working title of Ghost Mother. It's a little bit darker. It's a little bit more supernatural. I tell my publisher this all the time. It's like, that the young adult title that you put on Aroughcoune, it's like, I don't want to be known as a young adult writer, which is nothing wrong with that, but it's you don't see any Clive Barker or Stephen King or Dan Simmons young adult books, so it's like I wanted to like kind of stretch my wings a little bit and take the gloves off for the next one, and
Clive Barker's
really
Book of
go
Blood
out there.
is probably still one of my favorite books. Clive Barker's Book of Blood.
Yeah.
Still one of my top 10 all time. But
excellent. I mean, he's phenomenal, and Jack Ketchum and all these guys, that really take it. They push the limits, and they still tell a good story. Yeah. And that's the important part is making sure the story is there. So this next one, there's a little bit more body horror. There's a little bit. There's a little bit more science involved, and there's a little bit more Native American lore involved, but not as much as Aroughcoune. But it's Mingan's there, so you have to bring something in with him. But yeah, it should come out. I should be done with it hopefully early next year.
Okay, and that was actually my very next questions. Was that are cryptids and conspiracy themes something that you plan to revisit anytime soon? And well, there we go.
Yeah. I really didn't expect this to happen, but I mean, people, really love these characters, and that's wonderful. And now that I have them, I can do all kinds of things with them. That I never really thought of when I was writing Aroughcoune. So, I can take them in different directions. So this one is just like a little side story. Ghost Mother's a little side story with Bill and Mingan, and McKesson and Zinn, and I bring in the Men in Black in this one as well. But the other characters are kind of just like doing their own thing. They're not involved in this one, but I could bring them back, and do a Bill and Zinn story again, or I could do a Monique story, or I can, take them in all these different directions. And it's really freeing as a writer to have that base already written. Now I can draw from it and take them all in all these different directions. So as long as people still like the characters and the stories, that's great. I got a review on Amazon earlier this month, and the reviewer said, this was a really fun read. And I think at the end of the day, I mean, that was the highest compliment.
That's the goal, right? Is to have something really fun to read.
You enjoyed this story. You had fun with it, and exactly. Yeah, and just have something that people really that reverberates with them.
So I'm a big comic book guy, and this actually reminded me of two different comic books by the same writer of James Tynion IV. He has the Department of Truth that's all about conspiracy theories, and then he's working on. He's got a cryptid story called "Let This One Be the Devil," which is about the Jersey Devil, but that's supposed to be like the start of his cryptid series. It just so happened he started with the Jersey Devil, so it's kind of like a podge of those two stuck together with the Aroughcoune. And I think that's really dope because that's two of my favorite comic books right there. Just kind of like smashed together into this story. So it's really cool. And one of my favorite authors too, with James Tynion.
Nice. Yeah, it's there's so much out there, and what's amazing too is we've done as a family. We went to a couple different local conventions. We did Halfway to Halloween. We did Malloween. We did a Krampus Fest right before Christmas, and the fans, the people that come to these shows are just so incredible and so open-minded, and, just so willing to try something new and just roll with it. And, it's amazing to see that open up as well. People just, willing to take a chance on this book and this guy they never heard of before.
It's wild. Like,
then you see, the responses, you see the reviews pop up.
And it's wild that it could just be a spark, and they're like, oh, wow, this, I like this, and you'll surprise yourself at the number of people who will see that and go, you mean to tell me there's a 15-foot murderous raccoon with rabies out there? Hell yeah, let me get that. Because I would be that guy.
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh, damn, you got a story about a 15-foot raccoon? Hell yeah.
It's a hard sell. And that's, I tried going, through agents and publishing companies here in America for 2.5, almost 3 years. And I got to a point where I was so dejected, getting rejection after rejection on this. I told my wife, I said, I'm going to put this on the shelf for a while. And then that's when I found Roswell Publishing. And, it's a small publishing house in Great Britain, in England. And she loves niche, weird stuff. But yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, you tell somebody like, hey, this is a 15-foot raccoon with rabies, on a rampage, and people are like, they either roll with it and they're really cool with it, or they're like, that's kind of too far out of my comfort zone.
It's out there for somebody, and that's what's great about writing, and not just books, but comic books and these types of things. There's literally somebody or something out there for everybody, and eventually it will catch on. Like, a friend will go, hey man, you got to read this book. He's like, yeah, it's about this, but you got to read this book. It's good. And it is crazy because I'm familiar with Marcosia, which is based out of the UK. They do comic books, and I get a lot of those guys on here onto the podcast. And the UK does a lot of great stuff over there when it comes to publishing, especially independent type of stuff. So I think that's really cool that Roswell, shout out Roswell in the UK for publishing this, because it seems like you have a good book on your hands, and I'm going to be picking it up myself, to be fair.
I appreciate that.
So I know you said that the one thing that you wanted people to take away from this book is that this was a fun read. But what else would you want them to feel as they get to that last page and go, why? Like, I know, like, for me, it would be like, I hope there's another one coming like this, because I like those types of niche books.
Well, you're breaking up a little bit.
I was just asking, like, I know you said you wanted people to feel. Yeah, I'm here. Are you still good? Are we having audio issues again?
I'm here. Yeah. Okay. I just missed that. I missed that last question.
Oh, no, you're good. I was just saying, what do you hope readers feel when they close the final page? I know you said you wanted them to think, oh, damn, this was a fun read. But what else would you want them to feel from this book?
Hopefully, it checks off a nostalgia box for them, that it brings back their childhood. That it brings back those summer days where, summer seemed to last forever. You didn't want to go back to school. That you could tell yourself a good ghost story, and scare your friends, that type of thing. But just have them walk away from it, having a good time. Take a trip with me. Let me sit down by the campfire, tell you this story. And it's a quick read. And
that's what this does
feel
like.
A million times, just going over it.
It feels like a campfire story. And that's what's great.
Yeah. So, I just hope that it resonates with people and brings back some memories, and, maybe they might get interested in some science fields. Maybe they might get interested in, some local history. Maybe they might, look at things a little bit differently, or maybe it's that one, one thing that leads them down a road into conspiracy theories and, looking into all that lore. So, I mean, it's everybody has a catalyst for the interest in their lives. For me, it was those old black and white movies. It was In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy. It was Unsolved Mysteries as I got a little bit older with Robert Stack. So I mean, all these, so it's like these all kind of like you put these in your pockets and you carry them with you as adults. And I think the older we get, it gets harder to talk about those things, and we lose that wonder and that openness that we had as kids. To just say, hey, did you hear about Montauk Monster? No, tell me about it. That's gone now. People are like telling me, like, you talk about when's payday and how much overtime did you work this week?
Did you see that TikTok?
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully it opens up these venues for people and lets them at least sit down and read something, and use their brains a little bit.
Oof. That'd be something. Right. But before I let you go, what is your final message to horror fans discovering your work for the first time? Your final message to horror fans.
I'm sorry, repeat that again.
Yep. Your final message to horror fans reading your work for the first time.
Yeah. Go with it. I've read horror, like we mentioned Clive Barker, where you really get taken for a ride. You really have to expand your mind a lot to accept some of the premises that he puts in the writing. So you have, he wrote a story, In the Hills in the Cities, which talked about all these people getting together for a battle, these two cities, and they form these giant humanoid creatures, and it's just people, stacked on top of one another, and you're like, how would that work? But I mean, he pulls it off. So when you hear about something that's really way out of there, out of that comfort zone, out of that normalcy that everybody expects, and maybe a 15-foot raccoon isn't so far-fetched. So, just keep an open mind and look for new things.
Shane M gives you another shout out.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So, it's funny that you brought up that Clive Barker story in particular. I don't know if you're familiar with the TV show Grimm.
Yeah.
There was an episode called The Rat King, and one of the how the Rat King is formed is actually by these human rats would tangle themselves together to form a giant rat, hence the term the Rat King, which was a 20-foot rat. Yeah,
you can use your imagination to go in any direction you want, and this was a simple story that I put together. Anybody can do something like this if they have the will and the tenacity to just get it out there, and it's what's great about books and comics. And I could see Aroughcoune being a graphic novel easily.
That'd be really cool.
I don't think any movie studios would take it, but I could dream.
We did get Cocaine Bear.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Right as the book was at the publishers, it was over with Roswell, and my daughter was flipping through YouTube, and there was a trailer for this movie called Raccoon, and my heart dropped. I said, "Oh my God!" I said, "Stop! We have to watch this because it's
to make sure that
it had nothing to do." Yeah, and I was like, "Oh my God!" But
dude, I can imagine like your heart just dropping out of your chest from like, you got to be shitting me, right?
Yeah, and I watched this trailer for this thing, and I'm like, okay, that's 45 seconds I'll never get back. But thank God it had nothing to do with my book, or anything, because you look at the world, and you're like, you have Jaws, comes out, and then you have like Orca, the killer whale, and you have all these like knockoffs.
Orca was really good though.
Orca was good. I have to admit, and then now, 20 years, 30 years later, you have the Meg, all these different types of spin-off type things, but it's never going to be Jaws.
No,
and
never.
It just seems like these movies come out simultaneously. I don't know if there's like moles on the set that say, hey, they're working on this. Let's put,
I'm sure.
But I had that nightmare that Raccoon was going to be something close to what I did. Thank God it wasn't.
Thank God it wasn't, man. But Mark, before I let you go, tell everybody where they can find your book and where they can find you.
It's on well, if you do Amazon, it's on Amazon.com. If you don't do Amazon, it's bookshop.org. You can order it through your local bookstore there. Bookshop.org supports local bookstores. It's not in the Amazon network. My website is markberton.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, all these social medias that I try to keep up with. But yeah, and in the UK, if your audience stretches over there, Waterstones.
It definitely does.
Waterstones in the UK carries it. They have their own Amazon copies, but anywhere Amazon touches is probably the easiest place to get it.
That's awesome, Mark. So Mark's Facebook is Mark Berton Author, and you can find him on Instagram and Threads at Frog Elixir, just as it sounds, Frog Elixir, and Blue Sky at markberton.com.
I appreciate
that way everybody has that. Put that out there for you. And it'll also be tagged down below this video on YouTube and Facebook. Mark, it's been a pleasure, my friend.
You too. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so much.
So this has been another deep dive into the strange, the dangerous, and the unknown. Because here at the United States Department of Nerds, we investigate the stories that haunt you after the credits roll. The Council of Nerds are now convened. This has been the United States Department of Nerds podcast, where indie comics come to life.
It's a trap!